Hi, and welcome back to the podcast that must not be named. I am Luke,
I am still Melissa.
and we are still working our way through Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, book number 5, chapter number 22, St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. This chapter was 26 pages, and that is just under 3% of the book, 2.99%. Hey, Benj, let us know what happened this chapter.
Harry and Ron follow McGonagall to Dumbledore's office. Harry tells the headmaster about the attack and how he saw it from the perspective of the snake. After consulting an unknown instrument, Dumbledore instructs the portraits of former headmasters to help. One heads off and helps locate Mr. Weasley, calling for help. The other confirms Arthur's arrival at St. Mungo's Hospital. During this time, Dumbledore has McGonagall raise the other Weasley children and sends Phineas Nigellus to number 12 to alert Sirius that he will be sending the kids there to be close to their father. After she returns, McGonagall is sent off again, this time to head off Umbridge, who became aware of Harry and the Weasleys being out of bed. Dumbledore creates a portkey to send the students off to Sirius's. But just before the count of 3, Harry looks directly into his eyes and feels the sudden urge to strike, just like the snake had, before he was pulled away. On arrival, Harry hears Sirius shouting at Creature to get out as he attends to the kids. Fred, George, and Ginny want to head out to St. Mungo straight away, but Sirius stops them, explaining how dangerous and damaging to the Order and Harry that would be. After agreeing to stay, the group sit around the table in near silence all night until Mrs. Weasley arrives in the morning to let them know Arthur was going to survive. She thanks Harry for having his visions and saving Arthur's life. The Weasleys agree that they will stay at number 12 through the holidays to be close to Arthur, and Sirius is overjoyed to have the company. When he gets a moment alone with his godfather, Harry confides in him about being the snake and also felt like he wanted to attack Dumbledore. Sirius tells him not to worry about that right now. The next day, the group are escorted to St. Mungo's by Tonks and Mad-Eye to see Mr. Weasley. After seeing him, the children are shunted from the room so the adults could talk. Using the extendable ears, the Weasley children and Harry overhear Mad-Eye saying he's seeing inside Voldemort's mind, and that makes Harry concerned that he's being possessed himself.
All right there, Melissa. Big, exciting chapter for us here. Did you find any new character introductions?
There was like 100 people, just all the people.
And
then there were people that we've only seen sleeping, and now they're peopling, sort of. We've got Everard, we've got Dilys Derwent, we've got one who we've literally heard before but never seen, Phineas Nigellus. Then there's others, right? Elfrida Craig. My favorite are some of the descriptions of people in the St. Mungo. So a corpulent red-nosed wizard brandishing his fists, gimlet-eyed witch raising an unusually thick wand that looked not unlike a birch rod, the healer in charge, Hippocrates Smithwick, the trainer healer, Augustus Pye, Urquhart. Did I say that right? I did not.
I would just go with Urquhart.
Urquhart Rack Harrow from 1612 to 1697, inventor of the entrail expelling curse. I don't want to know why you would need an entrail expelled, but I don't want to know about that. Willie Wittershins, the newly bitten werewolf character, and many other ailing patients.
And technically many other people, former headmasters in portraits, but we didn't really get much description of them. But they're
other than they were, frustrated with Phineas.
Right.
As you are.
This was one of the tougher ones to decide who do I really include. Obviously, if they're specifically named or we have a specific description, it's a little bit easier. But there were a lot of unnamed other pieces in this chapter. So, location introductions. This is like my favorite thing when we get new location introductions, and this time we have new ones. And oh man, I gotta say, this is one of my favorite overall introduction locations that we ever get to go to.
Yes.
So we actually get to go to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, and when they're walking through London, it's sort of surreptitiously hidden behind a store or in a store called Purge and Douse Limited. And while they're at the hospital, obviously we kind of walk through the main entrance, but we also get to the dangerous Di Llewellyn ward for serious bites. So obviously I had to include that since it has a specific name of the ward itself. I don't know. I'm excited to talk about going to the magical hospital for sure. So
I agree. There was a little bit of magicabulary, not nearly as many people, but there's Portus, which is the spell that creates a portkey. Interesting that we got that this time. Healers, not to be confused with those muggle crazy doctors, right, who slice and dice. These are healers whose job it is to, heal people. Well named. And also the blood replenishing potion, which is an interesting concept.
I did notice, like most chapters, this one also has an illustration. So why don't you describe what you're seeing here in our chapter illustration?
So it looks like there's a small device with some intertwined smoke snakes dancing out of it. Snake charmer style is what it kind of feels like to me.
Yeah.
Like smoke snakes.
That's about the only description you can give it, I think. It's that's pretty much what it is.
Yeah, I'm not like, yes, this moment happened in the chapter. I don't think this moment is that, I don't know, maybe it's just me, and maybe it's that this moment of like Dumbledore consulting his weird toys never really stuck out to me as that important, and maybe it's more important than I really give it credit. But to me, it's okay. Dumbledore's playing with his toys and we don't really know what's going on. So why is that the focus of the picture when there's obviously others? Like, I want to see the talking dummy.
Yeah,
right?
just the Purge and Douse like storefront with the dummy in the window. Like, I think that'd be a great choice. I kind of agree. This is a bit of one of the more questionable choices.
Yeah. I might even put it down for least favorite because it just doesn't seem that applicable to what's going on. And I love the idea of Purge and Douse, right? There's this display window. So like, and there's so many, especially in large cities, so many stores that put so much effort into these elaborate display windows. I would love to see what the magical equivalent of trying to do a muggle display. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like, they're not doing a good magic display. They're trying to do a bad muggle display without much understanding of the muggle world. So what does that interpret to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, even other things in the hospital itself would be neat to see. Whether it's the board showing what all of the different levels are, like that could be easy. The front desk witch who's, very much like what Roz from Monsters Inc. is how I always imagine her.
Yes.
Just kind of continue, like, just bored at her job. You're not impressed. She's not impressed by what your ailment is. She's seen it all. Right? Like, that's just what I think, like, she would be interesting to see as well.
Or at the very least, if you don't want to give away anything about the hospital, how about a wall of the headmaster portraits?
Yeah.
Because they play a big part in this. And we wouldn't know, opening up this chapter for the first time, we wouldn't know what that meant. It's just a bunch of portraits.
Or the grabbing of the portkey, even. I mean,
right.
Like, that's, you could be a thing, too. And have a little glimpse of Harry's confusion as to why he wants to strike. Mm-hmm. We'll obviously get into more of that, but I agree. One of the more questionable illustration choices. Not a bad illustration. I just don't know why that was chosen necessarily.
Yeah, I agree.
Alrighty, after that lengthy illustration discussion about other things that should have been the illustration, Melissa, let's jump into your notes. I see you kind of have us separated out into the certain kind of points, the different scenes that we get. So let's jump right into Dumbledore's office.
All right,
that excitement.
Like, the first thing that really struck me was the fact that portraits can visit their other portraits. So if I have a portrait hanging in my house and a portrait hanging in my mom's house, the picture of me from my house can travel to the picture of me at my mom's house? Or is it specific to headmasters? Is there one subject that travels between the other frame? I have the questions and but it's a really interesting reveal in that moment.
Certainly a useful tool for the story. right? But I agree. It's neat. It's cool. It's one of those cool, neat things that was included that really kind of opens up too many questionable doors that it doesn't really make sense. Like, hey, every illustration of them in a book, can they jump into that book? And like, because then once they're in that book, can they jump to the illustrations in the other illustrations in that book? You know, it's like there's got to be a limit somewhere. And
Feel like
even the chocolate frog cards, right? Like, Ron's like, well, you can't expect him to hang around all day. It's like, well, why not? Is that the only instance of Dumbledore? So, like, say you and I both went and got chocolate frogs right now. We both got a Dumbledore card. Does he only show up on one of them?
right.
Like, that's...
I don't know.
It's
Or is
too
it
questionable for me.
I don't know. I feel like some of this conversation is a really good unrestricted section conversation.
Yes.
So I already have the note.
Perfect.
Don't y'all worry. But part of me is, I know back in book 2, Harry had his very own paparazzi and had many photos of himself taken. I don't believe the Harry in those photos traveled among photos. So I wonder if it's the medium might matter. Is it only paint? You talk about illustrations in a book compared to photos. Is there a special type of paint that has to be used? So we can delve more into that in a little bit. I like that it's officially said here they can travel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty useful for a Hogwarts headmaster probably to have that.
Yeah,
available.
it sounds like it. Specifically in this chapter, it is.
Yep.
I agree. It's definitely a cool thing. We'll certainly delve deeper into the unrestricted section discussion on more of the practicalities of it.
Yeah. I assume that the port key Dumbledore made was highly illegal.
Okay.
Because you're not supposed to be able to transport in and out of Hogwarts.
Okay.
And obviously they're watching out. They have Fawkes watching out for Umbridge. I just feel like it was sketchy getting the kids out of there. It was like they couldn't have waited till everybody else left the next day or whenever everybody was leaving. What was the purpose of having them leave right? I don't know. It felt very sketchy and a little like, man, so we're not above stooping below, laws or guidelines, are we at this point? It's more like guidelines anyway.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not making a port key is illegal, I don't know that should be true. I mean, it's just a piece of magic, right? I mean, it's
not ever. I mean, out of Hogwarts.
But he's also the headmaster, so it's kind of he makes those rules.
Okay.
I assume he's the one that somehow restricts other apparition in and out. I would just assume that he's got that power.
Maybe he didn't. It's not that he necessarily was one who created it, but sort of it's a power that the headmaster wields through the title
upon the headmaster. Correct. That's how I assume it is, and so that's where I think the clandestine nature of getting out was just because she's awful and she just doesn't need to complicate this situation. Umbridge, that is. And obviously it's less regulated, it seemed like, than the Flute Network. So that seems to be the reason why it's done that way to me. But I don't necessarily know if it's illegal. It's probably not advisable. Like, obviously, he's not going to tell Umbridge what happened or that they were even there.
Sorry, that took me down another whole path of how did he explain
right. Where are they? We're missing 5 students.
And I'm just checking to make sure we don't have anything like this, later on in our questions or anything. But I can just sort of imagine Dumbledore sitting with his elbows on his table and his, hands under his chin. Yes, Dolores, it's lovely to see you. Can I help you? Where are they at? Where are who?
Right. Just answering all of her questions with other questions, just thwarting her because he is so much smarter than her. It would not be difficult. That would be enjoyable to see that scene.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be fun. Okay. Speaking of things I would really like to see, the Gimlin-eyed witch, who is one of the former headmistresses, says, so Phineas they're like, hey, Phineas, go, I need you to go visit your other portraits. We've got a message. And he's like, nah, I'm not going to do that.
Nah,
And,
that's not on my to-do list.
somebody else is like, insubordination and we are honor bound. No, they don't yell at him. The Gimlin witch goes, shall I persuade him, Dumbledore?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to get mad. I'm just going to take care of it. I'm going to get Dumbledore's permission and then I'm going to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see that.
It's like, what could she really do? And who is this Gimlet-eyed witch, right? Like, how powerful must she have been that her portrait can strike such fear, like, or, command such dominance, right? Like, pretty impressive. I would love to see that as well.
It's the kind of leader I'd like to be. Nope, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm not going to yell. We're just going to get her done.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'd definitely like to know more about that witch, for sure. And the abilities of portraits to inflict persuasion upon other portraits.
I mean, obviously, I would assume that they couldn't necessarily inflict upon live humans, but portrait to portrait, that's equivalent standing.
Right.
So why not?
Yeah, I'm very, very curious about the abilities on that, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should jump down to yours before we get to my last one and your first one, because I feel like they're similar. And then
you want to skip my first one?
Yes, because I think that ties with my other one. That'll wrap up this section before we move to the next part of the chapter.
So I really love the conjuration magic that McGonagall has to do, right? Dumbledore asks her to, whip up some chairs, and she does. And it's clearly described at Harry noticing the difference between the comfy chintz, plush chairs that Dumbledore conjured at the hearing compared to these stern, stiff back, McGonagall chairs. I love the idea of the magic that you produce inherently has some of your personality or some characteristics of yourself into that magic, right? I think you get a big personality description just between the two of them, between Stern, McGonagall, and silly, comfy Dumbledore. I love that is shown in such a simple way.
Yes, because it's not that he couldn't produce a hardback chair or that she couldn't produce a comfy chair, but McGonagall would see no purpose.
There's no point
to producing a comfy chair, right? I just need a chair. We're just going to sit. And Dumbledore, especially where he put those chairs, it's such a boss power move, right? I'm sitting in the middle of the court. Everybody's looking down. I'm going to come up with a lazy boy.
I'm here comfy. You know what?
Put my feet up. I got my cooler with my beer. I'm good.
Yep.
Right? That was a boss move.
Oh, yeah.
On Dumbledore's part to do that. Whereas in the heat of the moment situation in this chapter, pulling out that kind of boss move with the comfy chairs, it's not necessary and not something McGonagall would occur to her to do to provide comfort to the boys. It's just, we just need to sit and I'm going to get it done as quick as possible.
Yeah, I completely agree that the scenarios are certainly different, but I love the idea in general that your personal characteristics show up in your own magical conjuration to some extent. Just your natural magic comes out with your own personality imbued in it. I think that's a cool idea.
I feel like that is something we should ask our first time reader and target audience perspective is what would your chair look like?
Ooh, cool.
So I'm going to put that question in. I hope we remember, but here I am.
So while you were typing that out, I will jump to my next note here. And we kind of talked about this in the illustration discussion, but we do get to see some of Dumbledore's silver instruments in action. We've kind of glimpsed them years prior. We actually get to see some of them in use. Any thoughts on that?
I think I just glossed over it because to me, okay, there's things being used, but unlike back in book 4, when we went into what's it called? The silvery thing with the bowl, the pensieve. When we did that, or back in book 1, when we had the put outer that we were specifically told, we watched the lights going out. Dumbledore's got such crazy stuff, and we're not given any explanation. We're not given any, and I think that's done intentionally to put us in Harry's perspective of him feeling like the angsty teenager, right? This is another example of, I just told you this and I'm saving this guy and you can't bother to even like fill me in one more time. I think to me, this scene, more than looking at cool objects, is more about making Harry feel isolated from information. And that's a very interesting way to do it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think that's a good point that you mentioned there. It's we're shown these objects again with no explanation, which is how Harry feels about the entire situation in general, right? Like it's just giving us another visual example, if you will, of his internal real issue, right? That he's been furious about all year. It's been months that he's felt this way. And yeah, I think you brought up a good point there for sure, that it's kind of another depiction of that for us to not know what's going on, to almost get a sense ourselves of what Harry's going. I've never read it that way. I think that's pretty cool. To me, it's always been more of like a showing off these really cool things that we just don't get a description of because they're like seeds that our writer can kind of pick at whenever she wants. Like, hey, there's a huge pile of stuff. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but when I need to pull out of it later, I have it there. Like, I've already set the garden. And now I'm just going to let it grow and do its own thing as needed. We've seen things like that before. Like in book 1, there were a lot of times where it's like, you're just dropping all of these names that don't matter to the story. But then like a book later, oh, remember this name that I used before? Yeah, pick and choose to make it relevant. That's what it always felt like to me a little bit. And also it gives you that sense of, wow, there's like just way higher things going on in the magical world that, like, this is Dumbledore level magic stuff. And yeah, we the readers aren't ready for the descriptions of what they can do, right? Like that's how I've always looked at it, of, it's just a way to show that yes, there is more than just silly wand waving, right? There's a lot more going on. It's kind of like Moody's collection of instruments. At least we got descriptions of what those were because they were relevant for us to know what they were. But here there's almost like, what some of them are probably just silly things or gifts that people give him, like, oh, another toaster, thanks.
One more faux glass.
Right.
Yay.
Just what I needed. So, I don't know. I always thought they were cool, and I'd love to learn more about them, what they can do for sure. Certainly the instrument that he uses is really interesting, and we get zero description. I think that one specifically absolutely is put in there, like you described, to make us feel a bit like Harry feels being left out. Because, yeah, Dumbledore's just doing his thing, trying to work out what's going on, and he's speaking cryptically, and, naturally, murmured Dumbledore, apparently to himself, still observing the stream of smoke without the slightest sign of surprise, but in essence divided. What are you talking about? Like, we don't get any description, any explanation. It's just, yeah, I think that is specifically put in there to get us frustrated with the way Dumbledore is acting, like Harry is frustrated with him.
Yep. Speaking of Harry being frustrated with Dumbledore and their weird dynamic.
Yes.
So Harry finally had a moment of eye contact with Dumbledore, but in that moment wanted to attack him. I don't necessarily understand, because, like, what's going on there? And I think your next kind of thought is why I'm confused.
At once, Harry's scar burned white hot, as though the old wound had burst open again. And unbidden, unwanted, but terrifyingly strong, there rose within Harry a hatred so powerful he felt for that instant that he would like nothing better than to strike, to bite, to sink his fangs into the man before him. Yeah, like, come on, that's a crazy feeling, right? Like, this guy that you've been like really trying to talk to, and like, yeah, you're frustrated with him for your own reasons, but like all of a sudden this really violent feeling erupts within you. Like, is this what Dumbledore has been worried about all year for some reason? At the very end of the chapter, we hear that maybe Harry's being possessed, or something. That's what we get at the very end of this chapter. That's kind of our cliffhanger. And is this what Dumbledore has been worried about? Is whatever's going on, Harry attacking Dumbledore, for the good or bad of either of them, like, is this what really Dumbledore's been concerned and why he's been avoiding Harry the way he has?
Wouldn't it be nice if Harry knew that? The
answer is yes. Hey, any information is better than
and maybe And maybe I am like, I'm still not old enough to take the grown-up perspective here, which I think in the last however many years, 4 years we've been doing this, I have proven that I'm absolutely taking the adult perspective 99.9% of the time. But angsty Harry is my favorite. And I just don't keep things from kids. Stop, especially at 15. Like, and that goes back to my parenting style, and I get that it's a personal thing. But for me, I have found that as an adult, kids handle disappointment, they handle no's, they handle whatever it is. And I don't mean little kids who like my 8-year-old still not quite there. But once you hit about 10 or 11, I am going to give you all the information, everything, because one, what your brain is going to think is going to happen is always going to be worse than what really is. That's first thing. And two, I think you deserve to know the real reason why. Like, I do that with my teenager now, and it's like, she'll ask something, and if I have to say no, it's no. Here's why it's no, and here's my thinking, and I'm sorry that it's no, but this is my thinking. And she's like, I get it. That makes sense. Like, and you get to be disappointed, or you get to be frustrated. You can even be mad at me, but it's important that you understand my why, that I'm not just doing it because I'm the mom and I can, and I'm trying to like manipulate you or control you or keep you, like, I have a reason and you deserve to know it. I feel like if Dumbledore has a reason, that's great. He is the grown up, and that is his decision is fine, but Harry deserves to know the reason behind it.
I completely agree. I'm very similar to you on that. Of I would rather give the information and work through that at that point, rather than me deciding what you get to know and what you don't get to know, as it is going to affect you. That's not for me to say, right? I can help you work through it, but that's not my decision on everything, and this seems, and maybe Dumbledore doesn't realize how much it's affecting Harry, right? His seclusion. He might not know, but yeah, like any effort would go a long way, it seems like.
Any effort.
Yeah.
Any effort at all. Try something, because this kid is really struggling. Anyway, so we move on to the next part of the book because we port key away. Yay for us. And now we're at Sirius's house.
Yeah.
Where tempers are flaring, rightfully so. And I love this scene. So there's so many perspectives going on here. You've got Ginny, who just like is just kind of like what's going on, and Ron, who's almost completely shut down, and Harry, who's trying desperately to justify what just happened. Sirius, who's also worried, but also like the perspective of this is the order, and this is the way it is, and your dad knew it, and the voice of reason, except it's Sirius, who's never been the voice of reason, who's always been bucking the system his entire life. Sirius, who's never once had to be an adult to other people because he's always just plowed in. So here he is for the first time trying to be a rational person and a rational adult. We've got Fred and George who are like, I'm in. And this is what we're doing, and I don't care. And it's so well done because everybody's right, except they're wrong. But like, everybody's right. Everybody's perspective is true, and it feels like everybody's point of view is respected. And even when Sirius is fighting against his nature, he's a head-on, let's go do it anyway type of guy, right? Especially being caught. He's been stuck in that house for so long, and now finally let's go do something, and he still has to be the voice of reason. I mean, you could see him battling with himself of not wanting to get angry or, dare I say, violent or just explode. And such a well done scene. And at the end, they're all just like sitting.
Yeah, no, I think you said it all there. It's an interesting look at how people deal with this information, right? The go-getters, the shutdowners, the just not understanding what's going on kind of situations, and wanting to know what's going on and being involved when sometimes there's more important things, right? It's hard not to be passionately wanting to go and help or be there if this is, Mr. Weasley's, maybe he's dying, that's what they think, and they want to be there.
Right. We don't know.
But like, how do you explain that? Like, you've already just vanished from school, that Dumbledore has to explain that. And now why would you show up at the hospital when the hospital doesn't even know he's there yet kind of thing. Like it's a tough one, and I think Sirius really does a great job of hearing them, understanding them, and still allowing himself to be that voice, like you said, of reason, and lets them know, he gives them the information of this is why we can't just go do this, and this is why this kind of outburst right here is not acceptable to be a member of the Order of the Phoenix, right? You can't just go running off in the middle of something and ruin the entire process, right?
Right.
There's more important things here, unfortunately, for you and your dad.
Which crack me up because to me, it's like that meme of like, I'm sitting around just waiting for mom to cook dinner. And then I realize I'm the mom. That's serious. Oh wait, I have to be the adult. Nope. So good. So well done.
Right along with that, well, I guess they kind of, I think that's a little bit later, but Mrs. Weasley finally shows up, right? After she went and checked on Arthur. She got the call from the hospital. She went, checked on him. Seems like he's been stabilized to whatever extent that is. And like, obviously, they had this discussion of it'd be nice if we could stay here, which is a lot closer rather than go back to the Burrow and just have the long trip. And, Sirius is like glad and just excited to have people in the house again, right? Like, I'm sure it's been lonely for him, and it's just really nice to see Sirius and Molly getting along so well, right? Like, it's like exactly what she needed, and he provided that for her, and it's good for everyone. Like, it really is a win-win-win-win-win 7 times kind of situation, and it's just nice to see those two adults who've butted heads previously from what we've seen, but like, they certainly mutually respect each other, and it's just nice to see them getting along a little bit better than they were earlier in the book.
Going along with that, though, they're all he's in a good mood, and Molly is better because, okay, Arthur's at least like recover, gonna recover, and we can like do this, and the twins are excited. Excuse me. And then there's Harry, who's still like freaking out. Sirius just kind of tells Harry, oh, just stop worrying. FYI, that never helps. But like, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Harry's worry, but can I just start by saying, Sirius, you actually didn't do anything to appease the situation and maybe made it worse by kind of blowing it off and saying, oh, don't worry, instead of like, let's talk about it and let's, anyway.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a valid point. It's a dangerous, the brushing it off as it's not a big deal. Clearly it's a big deal to that person, right? Like, right. I get like your effort is, good intentions, right? But guess what? Like you said, it could have really made it worse. Like, hey, you're basically saying, I don't value your feeling about this, is kind of what that can be interpreted as from Harry's perspective, which is not the intention, but that's how it can be taken when you're that already anxiety shaken up, right?
Mm-hmm. So
I also really like Harry's internal strife, like how would you feel if you were already emotionally amped up the way you are, and now you have this really confusing thing that just happened that, oh, I guess I wanted to attack Dumbledore? Like, one, the confusion on top of that, and also knowing that it was such a violent outburst of feeling that he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't want to sleep because he's afraid it'll happen again and he can attack somebody else in the house, right? Like, so not only the Dumbledore thing, but also the being inside the snake attacking Mr. Weasley. Like, yeah, he's in a pretty rough spot emotionally, and obviously that's kind of the theme of this book so far, but it really seems like it's coming to a head a bit on talk about really confusing, and now you're being you have a reason to be afraid of yourself because you care about these people. Like, that's not what he needed,
and in a way you can't control,
right? Absolutely.
So not only are you afraid of yourself, there's nothing I can do about it except maybe not sleeping, which is never a good thing.
Yeah, overall, this scene feels pretty familiar, and it's really well written in terms of capturing how like a single event can kind of erase everything else going on in your world, right? Like, this one event happens and your entire family, whoever else is involved, everything else just stops, right? Like that's the only thing going on. Like when they're sitting there waiting for Mrs. Weasley to get there and get news, right? Like how familiar does that feel? Like we've all been there at some point, right?
Yeah.
And man, it's like talk about a reset on life kind of thing. Like just sometimes those monumental things happen. It's like, okay, things are different now. And that's the feeling I get from this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's reading it this time, that's sitting around a table, all night long and not sleeping. Like we've been there recently as in our family, and it definitely hit different and luckily they had a positive outcome, right? That's as good as it could have gotten. But it was definitely, if you've been there and it's traumatic. And it resets kind of, okay, so this is what our family is now. Okay.
Here's to a new normal, right?
Yep.
So I thought that was really well written.
But then Mr. Weasley's good, not dead.
All good.
Good with not being dead. So we have the morning after and we start going, this is just the session traveling to St. Mungo's, because I feel like that alone was like its own journey, obviously, because they're traveling.
Right.
So this chapter just proves to me, and we've talked about it a lot, why this Harry is my favorite Harry. I love angsty Harry. And not because I love angsty teenagers. I don't. But it's so well done. He doesn't know what's going on. He wants answers. He wants answers from Dumbledore. He wants answers from Sirius. But then he avoids talking about what happened or anything. He doesn't talk to anyone who's willing to talk to him, because Tonks tried. Tonks tried to talk to him, but because in Harry's brain, only Dumbledore or Sirius would be able to help him, he completely blows off an adult who could maybe help if you would open up your brain a little bit, right? To me, that moment feels so true to teenager life, to a teenager living through a traumatic event, that I am going to box myself in and only let those people who I deem worthy or important or helpful or somehow related to it, only these 2 or 3 people can get in. No one else can help me because no one else can understand it, right? My life is so hard, you can't possibly understand how hard my life is. Unless you're one of these 2 distinct people, typically other teenagers, but in Harry's case, it's Dumbledore and Sirius. But Tonks might have been able to help. I don't know. It just feels so, I don't want to use the word immature, but lacking life experience, because something I've learned as the older and older I get, sometimes venting just a little bit to maybe not my close family member or a close friend, but just having a moment with a coworker of I'm having a bad moment. Can I just vent at you? Helps. Even though that person is not maybe directly related in my life and I only see every couple of weeks, having people that I can release to, even if they're not my people, that makes all the difference. And I think Harry in particular, and generalizing teenagers in similar situations, maybe don't see that value. I'm only letting in the people that I am letting in, and that is it.
Yeah, it could be just a certain, obviously it's based on trust, right? Like he's already so stressed out that he's protecting himself to an extent, right? That's the reason at least that's how I see it. He's doing it to protect himself and what people think about him, which is already gone haywire, right? Like if you're crazy, you might not want to tell everybody. Like that's what he's dealing with, right?
He's not even letting the Weasleys in,
right?
Which are usually his people.
Yeah. So a lot of it's because he doesn't know what's going on, and if he doesn't know, then he doesn't want other people to necessarily know either, I guess is the way I read what he's choosing to not say. And yeah, I mean, Dumbledore has always been a great resource for him. Obviously, one of the smartest people he'll ever meet.
Right.
And then there's definitely the personal connection with Sirius that, hey, this is technically your legal guardian. So that's a pretty good trusted person too. And the Weasleys have enough going on currently, so he doesn't want to add onto their bag either. So. Right. Yeah, Tonks maybe would have been a good point person to release to, like you mentioned, but maybe he doesn't want her to think differently about him right now. So I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I can see that. So we get to St. Mungo's. Do you want to talk about entering St. Mungo's? I know you had kind of a.
Oh yeah, I mean it really just reminds me of the first time we went to the Ministry of Magic, right? It's just one of those huge institutions, if you will, that are inherently, innately all magic, you know, and it just has that grand feeling of we have a cool new place kind of thing. And this is like a hustle and bustle, really well-oiled machine. Like everything's there for a reason. You know, we've got the different levels that you can go to for your different ailments. And I don't know, I just get that feeling of like the first time you go to Diagon Alley, or the first time you go into Gringotts, or the first time you go in, like it just has that same vibe to it of a cool new place of magical business, if you will. And I love when we get those. And this one is one of the more interesting ones just because of the nature of what it is. And I thought it was described wonderfully.
I'm trying to find a certain passage in here because it kind of goes along with it. Like, I like going into another place, but it really ties back to one of our favorite things that we've talked about since I don't even know the Diagon Alley chapter of book 3, right? Mm-hmm. We like when we go into the wizarding world at large. Mm-hmm. One of the moments that to me felt like this was such a well-designed world was all of these witches and wizards, you know, sitting in chairs and, you know, except they had elephant trunks or hands sticking out of their chests, but like they're just the bored people sitting in an emergency room waiting room. My favorite, let me see if I can find it. Here we go. A harassed looking wizard was holding his small daughter tightly by the ankle as she flapped around his head using the immensely large feathery wings that had sprouted right out of the back of her romper suit. That's just a human with a kid who's done something stupid, right? Trying to keep him from running off and do something else more stupid so I can go fix this problem. I don't think I've related to a parent in the wizarding world more than that right there.
Yeah. No, it kind of hits the nail right on the head, doesn't it? Of this is just everyday life. This is what it's like living in the magical world. And because I mean, how many crazy things would you see in a normal emergency room, right? Like the limited times you've been there, who knows what you're gonna see, right? Like you could have a guy sitting there with a nail coming out of his head because his buddy shot the nail gun at work, and it just, you know, or, you know, whatever. Like there's so many crazy things.
Well, I can tell you about all the times I've been there just with my son alone.
Yeah.
Like super crazy things. Had a seizure, run in an ambulance, right? Seizure from a fever. Stood up too fast near a fence and sliced his forehead open. That was an interesting one. And then the last one, he had an allergic reaction to a medicine and ended up with hives all over his body in like 5 minutes and had to be rushed to the hospital. Weird, random things. You know what I mean? Of like, my daughter's never been to the emergency room. I think I went when my oldest was 12 because she pulled her shoulder at sports. Other than that, the two of them haven't been in the ER. And, you know, my son had been there 3 times by the time he was 5.
Yeah.
That's kids, right? Like some will. And yep.
Yeah, I enjoy this. And then you get the woman at the front desk who she's seen it all, right? Like that's, again, like I just imagine it's like Roz from Monsters, Inc. I just, for some reason, get that vision in my head of just, you know what? This is my job. I've seen it all. You don't scare me. Here's where you need to go. Can you read?
Ward 49.
Right.
Next. 4th floor. Next. So I want to do just a quick discrepancy thing of the sign of where everything is and the difference between a ground floor and a first floor, and that typically in America our first floor is the ground floor, but that's not necessarily true in Europe. So just in case anybody was like tripped up on that, the first floor is above the ground floor.
The first elevated floor.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that somewhat depends, right? It varies too, because if you have an underground entrance to a floor, you might be the ground floor there, and you could. So if you have grade level, it's a level down on one side of the building, and your first level grade is up at the basically your main front door. Like that would be level 1 that you walk into. It's also your first elevated floor if you're going from the other side, so that would technically be your ground floor as well. Every building is different. something I deal with
I
consistently.
know. I said it purposely to see where you would go with it.
Yeah,
Yay.
so it somewhat depends, obviously, but I don't know if there's an overall difference between UK English and American English on that at all. I don't know if that's a norm.
So I will
difference.
tell you, when I took French class many years ago in high school, we specifically learned that in France, it's always ground floor than first floor.
Oh, okay.
I think that was a teaching point. I don't know if it's true. I just know that was in the textbook, and that like the teacher made a point of us having to learn the words. I don't remember the words, but the words for ground floor versus first floor, because it was like a standard difference.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say that does make more sense to me if you're looking at, yeah, like I said, elevated floors, maybe your first elevated floor. I think it simplifies things, but then you have the people like, well, how can we go down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 0? Like, no, don't worry about it. It's not confusing. Just walk out of the building, the floor that you can walk out of the building. Like, it's not that big of a deal. I don't know. Americans trying to do their own thing sometimes is
Darn customary units.
just to thwart those dirty Brits, right? Hey,
Pretty
the
much.
revolution was hundreds of years ago, folks. Get over it. We don't have to be different on everything.
So
Do you want to go through the different
Yeah.
floors?
yes, I can. So the ground floor, which is artifact accidents,
Cauldron
explosions,
wand
wand
backfire, broom crashes, etc.
first floor is creature-induced incidents,
For your
and
bites,
injuries.
stings, burns, embedded spines, etc.
as opposed to protruding spines, right?
Right,
Embedded
right.
spines. Okay. Magical bugs.
Contagious maladies, e.g., dragonpox, vanishing sickness, and scrofungulus.
Let me just say, I bet that floor is getting a lot of work this past 12 months.
Probably, yeah.
Right? Like, what does the coronavirus, does COVID-19 mutate into a magical form
Ooh, yeah.
for St. Mungos?
Man,
So just
vanishing sickness. I just feel a bit thin, you know. I feel like I'm vanishing.
it's the Matthew McConaughey commercial where he turns sideways and you can't see him because
Paper
he's
thin.
the paper. There you go. Third floor, potions and plant poisoning.
Rashes, regurgitation, uncontrollable giggling, etc.
Fourth floor, spell damage.
Unliftable jinxes, hexes, and incorrectly applied charms, etc.
Fifth floor, visitors' tea room and hospital shop.
If you are unsure where to go, incapable of normal speech, or unable to remember why you are here, our welcome witch will be pleased to help.
Lord.
Oh, that's awesome. So
So
good.
then we go in and we see Mr. Weasley.
Mhm.
He looks okay.
Mhm.
Maybe a little drained, but he's okay. Little light on the pints, but there's potions for that. We find out Willie Wittershins is behind the exploding toilets.
Finally, right? We've been
Right?
worried.
We talk about this all the time. All of these books have these B story and C story and D story, like underlying things to prove that life is still going on, that there are other stories and plots and things happening. This is what, right? The mystery of the summer of the exploding toilet solved. It was Willie. Oh, Willie.
Isn't that one of the best names we've had? Willie Wittershins.
It is. He really sounds like he should be a pirate boat captain.
Yeah, sounds like it.
I also then the kids kind of get kicked out, right? And in come Mad Eye and Tonks, and the kids are in the hallway. And of course, Fred and George pull out the extendable ears. And it just kind of strikes me that I don't really think they understand this whole keep the order business a secret thing. Because even before they left the room, they were asking questions and Dad's like, stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. You're not getting the eye signals and the thing. And now you're trying to listen in. I get it. And I think as a kid, it goes back to, I'm a teenager. I want to know what's going on. I need to know but this is why they're not in the order. And it's such a good example of you're not ready to compartmentalize that yet, to be able to say, yeah, I have to pretend this never happened, or I have to let go of some of this right now because it is in the best order of a greater good.
Right.
Fred and George are not there.
Right. Yeah. You might be of age, but clearly your behavior is showing us that you're not ready. Right. That's
Right.
what they're getting to. And but
Nobody
I understand.
wants to hear that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's. You kidding me? We get it. We're cool. We're hip. But you're not understanding the clandestine nature of running a secret organization. Like, the first word of that is secret organization. Like, stop shouting about it. Like, you shouldn't know about it. No
Right.
one else here should know about it.
Because it doesn't exist. Remember?
Remember how this isn't a thing? And we're not talking about working against Voldemort because we're not saying that he's around, and we're not part of a secret organization that's specifically trying to fight this.
What
Remember?
were you doing? I was at work. What did you do? I fell asleep. Where? At work. Where at work? Work. That's not helpful. No, no kidding. Duh. Shh. Now, when they go home, maybe Molly could have some of those conversations of like, okay,
Right.
I doubt she will. It's Molly.
Let's be honest.
The hospital, a public location is not the spot.
Right.
Okay.
I agree.
Do you have one more kind of thought there?
Yeah, so at
Theoretically.
the very end, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but we get the message from Moody, and it says, well, it's kind of a conversation between the adults in the room, right? And the kids are all out in the hallway listening in, and it starts with, "Yes," said Mrs. Weasley. She sounded rather uneasy. "You know, Dumbledore seems almost to have been waiting for Harry to see something like this." "Yeah, well," said Moody, "there's something funny about the Potter kid. We all know that." "Dumbledore seemed worried about Harry when I spoke to him this morning," whispered Mrs. Weasley. "Of course he's worried," growled Moody. "The boy's seeing things from inside you-know-who's snake. Obviously, Potter doesn't realize what that means, but if you-know-who is possessing him, ... Like, yeah, so it kind of seems like this is a bit what Dumbledore has been worried about, right? At least that's what we're getting from the other adults, that it seems like this has been there was some indication that something like this could happen, right? And yeah, I mean, if you know who is possessing Harry, that's a pretty scary place to be. Even at least he has some information now. It's not just, oh, I'm randomly going crazy like in my own head. I can't control these things. At least he has the hint of an idea now of what
Yes.
could be going on. It's not much. But
No,
it's something.
and as much as I'm like, tell him all the information, it's not going to be what he wanted to hear. And the way he heard it, it's not going to do him any favors, right? Because that's the worst case scenario at this point, it seems. And now all of a sudden I'm being possessed by Voldemort. And again, because it wasn't a trusted adult speaking to me that I could then process with, what is that going to do to him?
Right. He had to drop Eves to find out.
I ain't been dropping no Eves, sir.
There ain't no Eves in Hobbiton. So yeah, it could be scary coming up for him now, right? Like, he was already stressed and frustrated. Now, I don't know. We'll see what that does for him. Because this is an episode of our show and we do this thing, it's time to get to 5 burning questions. Melissa, question number 1.
To when we don't do that, they're just talking for okay. Question number 1.
We do this.
Where was Mr. Weasley?
Oh, he was at work. Yeah, I mean, he's just working late, right?
So the snake got him in his itty bitty cupboard office?
I guess so. I mean,
or did he just like fall asleep in the middle of like the lift?
Could be. Yeah, with all the paper airplanes. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. And the snake was just trying to get to a different floor. You know, miscommunication is really what it was. Mr. Weasley was startled, scared the snake. Snake struck, right? It's just a classic case of miscommunication striking again.
Okay.
Question number 2. Is it odd that Creature ignores Sirius's call to make breakfast?
Yes. Isn't that his job to do the things?
I would think so.
Boss man wants breakfast, man. Yes, it's odd.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Okay. Question 3. Now we get into the game called Would You Rather. Would you rather visit a doctor or a healer?
I'd probably go with the healer, honestly. I mean, if you can magically fix my simple little muggle problems, like, that'd be awesome. Like, it's like, hey, take a magic pill and you're fully fit and you're ready to go again. Like, yeah, I'd go healer, I think.
Like, I don't know what it would look like for, say, cancer, but like broken bones, torn tendons, which is mostly what ends up happening at my house because I live with a bunch of athletes. Not me by any stretch of the imagination, but Probably 75% of the doctor's appointments from my house happen because they all get injured in sports. So, yeah, if poof, bone healed, poof, ligament, poof, your weird hip flexors stretch better than they need to, and you don't need 6 months of physical therapy for each child at the same time. Not that I'm complaining. Nope, healer every time.
Yeah, I'd say so. Body, reparo, poof.
Yeah. I just think it's weird that both my girls who've been doing sports for years both had like weak hip flexors at the same time.
Oh, really?
I'm not kidding. This is what we did in the fall. We just drove them back and forth to physical therapy at different times, of course, because that would have been too easy.
Oh, sure. Cool.
It's fine.
All right, question number 4. Another would you rather. All right, here we go. This is and I even trimmed this down a bit. So these are the people that are in the first waiting room that we glimpse.
Who are the people in your waiting room?
Would you rather live with an elephant's trunk, an extra hand coming out of your chest, an excessively hot head that whistles like a tea kettle, or your body to vibrate and clang like a bell every time you move?
Okay, well, I feel like the elephant trunk and the hand are extraneous extremities. I'm very proud of myself for coming up with that term. And that would just be it. Like, that would bother me. I wouldn't like those. So it's between the hot head tea whistle or the vibrating and clanging like a bell every time I move.
Clang, ring out like a bell.
Ring, ring, ring goes the chime. I think that would be more annoying of the two. So I'm going to go with hot head with the tea kettle.
That sounds really annoying to me too. Like, I don't know. I'm awful at having a fever. Like, I just don't like it. It's like one of my least favorite things. And it feels like that would be like a constant fever. So that wouldn't be my choice. But I could see the problems with the other ones for sure. The bell ringing to me would be pretty annoying as well.
Right? And like a hand coming out of your chest, how would you dress? No.
It could be useful though. I don't know. I'm between those two. I'm between the elephant trunk and the hand coming out of your chest, personally.
I think the elephant trunk would be useful. It'd be more useful than a random hand.
Depends on where the trunk is, right? Is it on your face?
I think it's your face.
I would assume
I think
so.
it was like
Instead of a nose.
The nose.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, that could be... You could at least get a cool job, I would think.
I was going to say sideshow freak.
Yeah, right. I think I'll go elephant trunk. I think I will.
Sounds good. Question 5. How did Harry see from the perspective of the snake? I know Moody said if you know who is possessing him, but is that really true? And even if it's, or is it not true? And if, like, how did Harry see what the snake saw? How'd that happen?
Well, in his head, I guess. I love that line whenever Dumbledore goes like, so how did you see this? And Harry's like, in my head, I guess. Dumbledore's like, you misunderstand me. I mean, like, what was your perspective, right? And but I just love like that kind of Harry's almost nonchalant, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't know how that's why I'm here. I don't know. But so how did Harry see the perspective of the snake? I mean, it just feels like, Voldemort has to be involved in this somehow. And if it really is the snake that we've seen before, Nagini, we've seen it before with Voldemort back in book 4. I mean, it just seems like there's probably some sort of possession type thing going on. I don't have any clever, funny responses to it other than sometimes the most simple thing, most obvious thing is what it is. That's just what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree with you because that's what the conversations are pointing us towards. I was just wondering if there was some sort of obscure fact or something within the story that we've missed because misdirection happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing that I can really think of, I guess.
Okay.
Because this is still our show and another one of our episodes, we get to do this as well. Our chapter superlatives. Melissa, what was your favorite line?
If you are unsure where to go, incapable of normal speech, or unable to remember why you are here, our welcome witch will be pleased to help you. I just like that that's an official sign.
Mm-hmm.
If you are unable to remember why you're here, I will help you.
Yeah, it's good. I agree with you. That's pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite line, I kind of struggle with this chapter. There were a couple good ones, but nothing that was, besides that, like a real killer.
Yeah.
So I picked, "Oh, Sirius, I'm so grateful. They think he'll be in there, they'll be here, there, a little while, and it would be wonderful to be nearer. Of course, that might mean we're here for Christmas. The more the merrier," said Sirius, with such obvious sincerity that Mrs. Weasley beamed at him, threw on an apron, and began to help with breakfast. I don't know, I just like those two. Like, I love both those characters, right? And seeing them at odds before, it's just nice seeing them on the same page and helping each other. And not that they were enemies or anything, they were just on different sides of a disagreement, right? And we were kind of obviously more on Harry and Sirius's side in that discussion. But I don't know, it's nice to see Mrs. Weasley happy in this really dire circumstance, right? And the fact that Sirius is the one that kind of allows that to happen is just good. I liked that whole scene there. So, who are you going to dub the chapter MVP?
It was difficult because no one did a lot, right? If you ascribe to the Riley method of picking value,
The Riley method.
There wasn't a lot of doing. There was some, like Dumbledore did a little bit of doing, but he also did a lot of avoiding doing that I think could have been done. Sirius did some restraining of doing and some like adulting, which was positive, but that and then the rest of them did a lot of sitting and waiting, which is hard in and of itself. If I ascribe to the Lorelai method of value, it's whoever I like the most in the chapter. Nobody really got me in the heart this time, right? So I narrowed it down to 3, and then I saw that one of them was your honorable mention. So I took that person off. I'm like, okay, good. Whew. And I think I cannot pick Dumbledore because I'm so frustrated on behalf of Harry in the lack of communication. Because even now, reading this chapter for the 75,000th-ish time, I still don't get it. I don't get the closed offness. I don't understand it. And I don't know if I ever will, because 20 years in, you'd think I'd figured it out by now. I haven't. So I'm going to go with my last man standing, former headmaster Everard. We didn't talk a lot about Everard and Dilys, who really deserves a good shout out too, but I don't think Dilys did nearly as much. If it weren't for Everard, they literally would not have found Arthur's body. They would not have found him. He would not have been saved in time. And yes, some of that is because Harry had the visiony dream observational powers, and because McGonagall believed him, and because Dumbledore believed McGonagall was the reason Everard, and because of whatever anomaly the pictures and portraits of the headmasters have. But if it weren't for Everard, both the actual headmaster to be good enough to also work wherever it was that he worked, which I don't think they said, just wherever he was, that his ability to transfer portrait to portrait and the ability to raise the alarm really, that's the reason why Mr. Weasley was able to make it to St. Mungo's. So I'm going to go with Everard.
Trying to quickly look and see if they do mention.
I think I checked and they do not.
Okay. Anyway, I kind of agree. That kind of feels like it's almost the Riley method, right? Like his action potentially is the biggest,
right. And
but it takes all those other pieces.
It's not like it extended over the entire chapter, but that was the biggest catalyst and plot movement.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I appreciate the shout out to Dilys Derwent as well. She was just as useful. I also want to give a shout out to the Welcome Witch. Obviously, I've talked a lot about her this chapter. She was fun. I wish we got more from her. Definitely didn't do enough, I think, to get the true honorable mention. So an honorable shout out, I think, is valid. I went with Sirius, and I do think his effort to restrain the kids and to hear them out and to explain everything, along with supporting Molly, were all really, really good. I think he did a great job of keeping cool, obviously managing what he had to manage, and I thought he was very successful in what was thrown onto his plate, if that makes sense. And so I'm gonna give him the honorable mention this chapter.
Yeah, I agree. He was definitely on my short list.
Good choice.
And that wraps us up for this chapter of This Thing That We Do. So you can find us in all the places, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Not Named Podcast. We have an email that you can send us your digital owls and any other information. Also fanfics of, what was the thing we wanted to see? There was something we wanted to see here. Like, I'd really like to see that. Whatever it is.
I want to see more from the Welcome Witch. I'd like to see her
Yeah.
day to day. Like what
Or pictures of the your drawings of the entry to St. Mungo's, the Muggle version of a window.
Purge and Douse.
So send that to us. You can check out this show and all our shows at our website, thepodcastthat.com, or on YouTube at Drawbridge Media. Check us out, subscribe there. You can see and hear this show and all our shows and get notifications whenever we go live or post new content.
Yeah, we also hope that if you are using your phone or whatever MP3 device, subscribe and rate us on iTunes. It helps a lot of other people find our show. We truly appreciate it. Give us a comment there. We'd love to hear from you. This show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com are produced with the love and support of our wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. You can learn more about our reward tiers at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
We'll be back with chapter number 23.
Christmas on the Closed Ward. Stay imaginary.
Thanks.